everything spawns from literally just me writing in the mornings and then creating a long form video based on those 5 writings that I wrote and then repurposing on different platforms.
Create for No Reason is your weekly dose of inspiration to create what you believe should exist in the world. It's where passion meets craft, and we explore the joy of the creative process and building a meaningful body of work. Raylen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
We made it.
We made it. We did it. I'm so excited to reconnect with you because we've known each other for years.
Long time.
Oh
Like
my
5
gosh.
years.
That's so crazy. We met on Clubhouse and when we were basically in touch every day.
We talked every day, yeah, for hours.
That was that was a crazy time.
Yeah. I
So
kind of miss it.
crazy.
The only thing that's like close to Clubhouse right now, the feeling of it anyway, is Threads for me.
Yeah. I think that's where we I had seen something that you wrote and shared, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, let's get Raylen back on the show," because you were sharing about your idea of creating and creating for the fun of it. But before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about what you do for work, what your business is before we get into the content
Yeah.
creation.
So overall, I help people build enrollment systems, and all that really means is I'm transferring businesses from going from, hey, I sell a service to you do enrollment, and the reason why is because to me anyway, sales has always felt transactional. You buy a widget, here's the widget, all right, cool, I'll see you around. But the businesses that I work with care about the transformation. How are we changing people's lives? And so that requires a different type of sales process. So me and my team will implement a high ticket enrollment system into our business. And so the 2 people we typically work with, on one side is the coach consultant. The other side is actually trade schools, just because I have a passion for like, not everyone's going to go to a 4-year university. There's some schools or some people that are going to go and be plumbers. And so that's like my way of like supporting those higher education places. So I always have a passion for that, but that's what I do.
I love that, especially today, because look, those are the businesses that are going to be booming because
Mhm.
people don't want to get into the trades. Everyone wants to be social media influencers now.
Yeah. And there's high demand. Again, that whole industry is super interesting because it's super high demand. And what I also like, not to get in a huge tangent here, but I like the responsibility. So when I work for a trade school and I'm doing their consulting, what we're doing is we have to enroll the student into school. The only way they get paid is if they show up. And the only way they can keep existing at the school is if those students not only graduate, but they get jobs in that field. If they don't, and they have very strict guidelines around this, like 70% of your students have to get jobs in that area. If not, you get shut down. That's not the same for typical university. Like it doesn't matter at that point.
Oh, interesting.
So the stakes are a little bit higher for the schools.
Yeah,
But yeah, I obviously kind of love that industry.
that's awesome. Well, you're also a creator. You create a lot of things. You and I connected so well over on Clubhouse because we were just there was a lot of creating going. We also share a passion for books and
Yes.
personal
Can't tell from our
development.
backgrounds.
I know. Lots of books, bring on the books, and really just personal development in general. A lot of your content is around helping people grow and just seeing things differently. And I really always appreciated all of our conversations because they were thought provoking and help people see their life in a different way and kind of empower them to do something different if they were in a place where they didn't want to be. And you create a lot of content, but share a little bit about your journey because I know you said that you were creating content, then you were loving it, not loving it, and now you're kind of re-energized to create different types of content now.
Yeah. So when I first started as a coach, right, sales coach, the game was really simple: create organic content that then generates leads for the business. So somewhere on the along the line, it became I was creating content to generate leads. That was the purpose. And so for I don't even know, like maybe a period of 2 or 3 years, every single day I was doing a video. Every single day, same stuff. Here's the hook. Here's 3 ways to improve your blah blah blah. Right, and it was fine because I was in the process of grinding. Somewhere along the line, I like maybe clicked on a piece of my content and I was like, I would never watch this. This is trash. Like, not because there was value in it, sure, but I don't watch that content. The content I like to watch is long form videos on YouTube and more introspective and more of a documenting the journey versus creating, right? I finally made this kind of switch when it's maybe a year or so ago. I met a guy named Eddie who runs a really successful YouTube channel called Your World Within. And I was asking about his creative process. And the fact that not only he has a huge following and a successful business, but the two things are almost separate for him. He creates to create. And he said for years, he wrote a speech every day. That was his thing. He just wrote a speech and it was motivational, and that the whole channel is motivational. And I just kind of fell in love with the idea of like just working on the craft of creating. And so then it became this experiment of like, well, what if and it was kind of a dangerous kind of risk of what if I stop making that kind of content and I just made content that I wanted to make? Well, the business didn't die. It was weird. Like it actually like did a little better. I had better people coming to me. I had better clients that I actually enjoyed working with. So I was like, oh, well, you look at it and you go, oh, that makes sense because I'm creating content for people like me. And so I'm attracting people like me to my business. And so I enjoy working with it. It just makes sense versus just the whatever. So now I guess, when I create content, the first question I ask is like, would I watch this? Which is funny because it's the opposite of the advice that we used to get on the Clubhouse days. You're not creating for you, you're creating for your audience. No, I did that and I hated it. So now I'm just creating for me. And if you like it, dope. If you don't, all right. There's other people out there. It's fine.
It's such a different feeling to approach it that way because you're right. I feel like this is such the conversation I have with a lot of my creator friends of this is what this is what I was told works. And look, we've all taken the courses, done the things. Here's the way that you map out and build your Instagram or your YouTube, whatever it is that you want to build. And it always like it never really felt great to me. Like
Yep.
I always felt like it's like the listicles, like five who
Mhm.
everyone can write a 5 ways to do X or
Yeah.
and it didn't feel so like when you feel like you watch something that is more authentic and more just fun or ripping or talking about something, you can tell that you love it. And
Yep.
that's a very different video. I remember I would watch videos sometimes that would go so against what the gurus would say. But here I am watching somebody do a long form live video on YouTube. It was like 20 minutes and just talking and I'm like, why am I still watching this? But
Yeah.
I like watched the whole thing.
Yeah. I got really into it. Now, granted, I had to make a separation because this also could hurt you a bit, but the most of the content I was watching was vlogs. So it was but they were creators. And for a minute there, it did make me stop creating because I was like, I'll never be as good as these people. Well, it's because the people that I loved went to film school and they were doing these cinemas. Like I don't know lighting. Like look at my room right now. I don't know how to light things. Like I suck at that stuff. So then I was like, okay, well, what's the difference between me and them? I was like, well, I can riff. I can tell stories. And so there's gonna be some people that enjoy it. And then I think the first kind of inkling of like, oh, this is the direction I want to go is when I had the thumbnail was hot garbage. The shots were a mess. The angles were terrible. The lighting was terrible. But I had so many comments and so much
Mm.
engagement compared to my other stuff. That was probably better looking and all the other stuff. And that's when something clicked. I was like, oh, there are people out there that just want to hear what I have to say around this. And so now it becomes a game of like, create the content and then do it consistently enough. Don't quit until the creator gods, whatever, can find the right audience for it. Like eventually you'll find it. And again, I think about all the people that, the Mark Mansons of the world, the James Clears, the people that write these books. It all started with them creating a blog and they just wrote really for them. And then eventually the audience grew and grew, and then they wrote a book. And so, but the thing people don't talk about is the years it took to get there. And I think because of short form content, we want the quick hit. So now again, I'm in the process of can I enjoy the process of actually create? Can I enjoy the process enough so that way I will outlast everybody and eventually, right, build an audience or do whatever. And then also being okay with the fact that if I never get that audience, I'm still okay. Because for me, again, part of the reason for like the YouTube channel, for example, which if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see how many types of content I've tested. Right. I like to use my channel as I always tell my clients, don't ever like use my channel as what to do because I'm every other video is different because I'm testing different things
Yeah.
to see what I like. And I finally found, and we'll get into later, I found a really good cadence that I really like. But the part of the other thing was I started making content around, hey, what if something happens to me or whatever, and my kids get to watch my channel, right? Or, the things that I write in my newsletter eventually become a book. Like you read, have you read Hell Yes or No by
Oh,
Derek?
yeah.
Okay.
Derek
So,
Sivers?
yeah, how that's written, when I read that book, I was like, I could be a writer, which I've never felt that before. Because I grew up, hated writing. I sucked at writing, all this stuff. I read that book and I go, this is how I want to write. Because he writes how he talks. And I was
Yes.
always told in school, don't do that. But now it's okay, well, I feel like I could write a book. So now my newsletter is going to kind of feel like that. Because what I want to do is, again, even if I don't get to ever write a book, at least my kids could read my newsletter and see the insights, right? And then it's short hitters. They could read it literally in 3 minutes, whatever. And so all of it turned from I create content, generate leads to I create content for me. And if you like it, cool. If you don't, like whatever.
Okay, there's a couple things that I wanna touch on. The first is, what I love about what you're doing is we can start to understand more about what we wanna share and how we wanna share it by creating this kind of content. So the more that you're writing, I mean, writing is definitely it's an interesting way to solidify your ideas
Mhm.
because everyone's got ideas, right? We don't need more ideas. Everyone has ideas. And when somebody thinks about writing a book, they have an idea for the book. But when it comes to actually figuring out what is the book about, what am I going to put in there? How am I going to write it? Those are the things that take a lot of time, and they're not always fun, and it doesn't take, 5 minutes. It's a process. It could take days, weeks, months to, like, put things together, and so by doing the newsletter or by doing daily videos or whatever your form of content creation, you're really helping solidify the ideas that you really care about and then
Mhm.
figure out a way that you wanna package them correctly, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I love about writing. In fact, Seth Godin talks about this, right? He thinks everyone should have a daily blog. He thinks
Yeah.
everyone should write every day. And I mean, his blog is what? Sometimes it's a sentence long. It's not a big thing. It's just something he's thinking about. And so I think that's really cool for people that want to create. And some people do that on TikTok for that short form. They just kind of put little pieces out. But you said that when you started looking at some creators, it almost stopped you from creating. I think this is a real challenge for people, especially because of not only imposter syndrome, but especially comparison. We
Mhm.
compare our content to other people's content. And when you see someone who's already quote unquote doing what you want to do, it can sometimes deter us away from creating what we wanna create. So how did you get through that mindset so that you stopped thinking about it or stopped watching them altogether so that you could create what you know is meant for you?
I did exactly that. I stopped watching. So there was a
Mm.
period where I just stopped watching content. I don't remember how long it was, but I stopped watching stuff on YouTube. Um, I stopped really everything and I just created. And it started around the time I read Rick Rubin's book,
The creative
Creative
act.
Act.
So good.
So I was on actually it was me and my wife's honeymoon. I brought the book on the cruise ship and I read the book. And I loved how he talked about creating. Like you just fill a table. So this is my actual action of what I did. I translate it into what I have these Rocketbook, it's called Rocketbook note cards that are you could write on and they're cool because you can erase them afterwards and reuse. But anyway, I would have a concept and I'd write down a sentence of what I thought about that concept. And then by the time when I'm done and I have these little file boxes, when this is full, I know I have a video. So then I would go through that box and then I do what he talked about the pruning process. That doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, and then you organize it. When I started doing that, I was like, it felt, I don't know, it sounds lame to say this, but people that love creating, I guess this language is okay. It felt more pure. There was nothing in the way. And so it was just me and the muse and whatever else. And then you can also tack on top of that, like the War on Art, right? Stephen Pressfield. So those 2 books, those are the only content you could say that I engaged in. And then after that, I stopped watching videos. I stopped reading people's stuff just because I wanted, like, who am I? Like, what is this process? And that's really what got me through it. And then I slowly started to watch content again. And then that compare it wasn't really comparison, it was just understanding the difference. Like, oh, they have different, goals than I do. Or in the case of my buddy Eddie, he's been doing it for years. And finally, once I stopped watching content, I finally got to categorize it in a way that wasn't comparison. It was truth. Like, Eddie is better at creating motivational content than I am, because for years, he did the shit that I didn't wanna do, which is sit down and write every day. And so I'm just gonna write, and then what happens, happens. Like, that was the kinda thing. So if anybody's kinda stuck in that like imposter syndrome or comparison, I know it sounds weird, but just literally stop watching content.
Yeah. Oh, it's so yeah, it's so true. I often remind myself to create before I consume, because if I don't, then I can almost feel even how I'm writing or how I approach things. I would do it much differently than if I
Mhm.
just let myself say what I wanna say in the way I wanna say it.
Like, this
Because
happened recently, right? So I was on Threads, and on Threads, right, it's same thing as like a Twitter thread. How most people write their threads and why they're so successful is because the first thread, the first post is a hook and one sentence maybe and an image. So it'd be like Alex Ramosi sold his business for $100 million, and here's the 5 key lessons of watching Alex Ramosi. And then you go to the thread. It works because the hook captures you and you go through. I don't write my threads that way because personally, when I write it, I don't like talking like that. That's not how I talk. Like if I'm talking to you, I'm not going to say, "Hey, there's 5 things I learned from Alex Ramosi when he sold." It just doesn't make sense to me. So I write my threads wrong, and they don't get nearly as the views and all this stuff. But when I look back on those threads, I'm like, I like it. Like I said what I wanted to say. So it is what it is. But had I engaged and looked at that thread before I wrote something, I'd try to write like them, and then it wouldn't come to me in the way it should. Now, you could argue, well, Raylan, if you want to grow a business, maybe write the way that I write and then put it in that format so it does better. Sure. I don't want to, though. I just don't want to. I'm going to write the way that I want. And if you like it, then you like it.
well, that's where it goes back to making that clear distinction. If and we talk about this on the show quite a bit, is if your goal is to be an influencer, build a YouTube channel, make a living on YouTube, then of course there are principles, there are practices, there are basics and fundamentals of building that kind of business that are going to be really helpful for you. Like, you
Yeah.
should know the hook and how to start it and how to end it and have a call to action and do all the things, because that's very different than just creating for the sake of, "Hey, I want my kids to watch this. Hey, I wanna watch this and be proud of it." I asked one of the guests, I remember, "How do you measure success?" And the answer simply was, "Am I proud of it? Am I
Mhm.
proud of this work?" And that really resonated with me because so much of what I create is because of that. That's not my particular goal, but hey, if that's the goal for people, that's amazing and beautiful. If you need to generate leads on your YouTube channel to grow your business, well, then just know that those you're playing by different rules.
Yeah.
And for someone like you, I love this place that you're in because I think there is so much freedom. And I think that down the line, there could really be some interesting ways that it does help to generate business. Maybe
Yeah.
not, but it doesn't matter. But the fact that you're giving yourself that space to just explore, that makes the content come across in a different way as well. You can tell it's more authentic because it literally is for you.
It reminds me of like Alan Watts' backwards law. Like the when you try to do something, you fail at it, right? It's like the idea of trying to be happy. Like you'll never be happy, or you can just accept what is, and eventually you just get happy. There's a funny book called The Grumpy Monkey that I bought my son, and in the book, the entire time he's like, "I'm grumpy." Everyone's like, "Stop being grumpy. Go for a walk. Do this." And so finally, at the end, he just goes, "I'm grumpy," and it just is what it is. And at that moment, he becomes happy, right? So it's the same kind of thing with my content. What I found, what was super interesting on accident, is I was kind of, I think I told you this earlier before we started recording. I started creating content like this And then finally, when I started getting leads again, right? There was a I'll be transparent. There was a period of time where I was not generating nearly as much business as I was before. But then something turned and the people that came to me to do work, they felt like they knew me. So, and because they felt like they knew me, I didn't have to sell. It was just, this is the thing that I do. Do you think it could help you? And they're like, yes, because I've watched hours of your content and I trust you. Oh, cool. Right now, it's a little weird because obviously I've not watched you or I don't know you and you feel like you know me. But like at the same time, though, although I'll give you a real world example. I have a buddy of mine that reached out to someone or recommended me do a talk, a workshop for another trade school. And so I was like, I called him. I was like, hey, man, thanks for the lead. I appreciate it. What made you recommend me? Right. And he said, well, I watch your content all the time. And she brought up she had a problem with her sales process. And I said, hey, I know a guy. And I go, well, what did you tell her that I did? He goes, well, I don't know what you do. I just watch your content all the time. And I figured, I just figured you could help. I don't know. You figured it out. So it was interesting. It was like that aha moment. Again, in when we were creating brands and all this stuff online, we tend to think they have to know what you do. Well, yes, it helps. But also, if people get the vibe, right? If people understand and learn from you, they may not know exactly what you do, but they'll bring you up. It's like the example I said earlier. Like when you truly are enthusiastic about something, you're going to recommend the hell out of it. "Hey, you need to read this book. I get nothing out of it, right? Like I didn't write the book, but I think you should read this book. It'll change your life. Like that's how I feel about 10x easier than 2x. I met the author recently, Dan Sullivan, and he literally was like, "Hey, thanks for always recommending the book. I don't get no money from that, but I freaking love that book, and I will tell
Yep.
everybody until the cows come home." That's how your what your content can do if you create it from an authentic place that you enjoy it. Those people eventually will find it and then become huge supporters of it and tell other people, and that's where the business comes from. Again, it takes a minute. It's scary. Like it was for a minute there. It was a little scary for me. I was like, "Oh, what am I? Am I doing the right thing?" Because everybody that I talked to was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Like, I talked about the backwards law. Like, I did a video on that on YouTube. Has nothing to do with my business. 0 to do with my business. It's still my most viewed YouTube video, and I've gotten leads from it, even though it has nothing to do with business. Although I do talk about it in the video. I talk about how in sales, right, you can smell someone's commission breath because they want it so bad. I want the sale. I want
Yeah.
the sale. Versus the backwards law teaches us that it is what it is. I'm here to support. If you do it, cool. If you don't, also cool. But again, leads came from a video just because I was curious. Like I'm genuinely curious about Alan Watts. The guy's crazy. Like I just was like, I want to talk about this concept because I think it's crazy.
Commission breath. That's like you could apply that same thing for content, right? Because we've all seen videos where you can tell it's so scripted and
And
it's
they're like, they really want it to do well. However,
yes.
it's an ongoing joke that like when you make a piece of content, you just throw it out there. It does really, really well.
Well,
Backwards law.
I feel like that's so true in other areas too. Like in business, I remember there were things that I've invested in and I was like, this is the thing. This marketing campaign, everyone's going to love it. It's going to be amazing. It's going to drive the most leads and all the stuff. And then meanwhile, I'm like off here doing like a group or training or something else. And I'm like, this is the thing that worked. And the marketing thing that we spent so much time on, it was like,
Mhm.
it was all right.
Yeah.
So it's so funny. But that's true.
And
I hear the biggest creators talk about that, how they'll work so hard on a piece of content, writing it, producing it, putting it out, and then the thing that they shot when they were on their walk is the thing that gets the most.
yeah, and it's also again to your point in business. So for a long time, I've been saying people have been telling me to create a course around the enrollment process, right? Or just how to enroll people in general. And I just kept putting it off, and it felt super overwhelming to me. It's like if you say, "Hey, in 1 hour," because I made this crazy goal. I was like, I want one lesson, one result in 1 hour. That's the course I want to make. And then I started thinking about it. Okay, how can I teach everybody and everything I know about the journey between when you capture the lead to when you enroll them? And that's everything I know. I want to give that to somebody. It became overwhelming. It was like that's so much. How do I put that in a thing? And it became this really difficult. I was like thinking about PowerPoints, and then finally talk about creating. I have this thing called the vibe board, and I pulled my vibe board over, I shared the screen, and I literally started recording me teaching it, and it got done in 2 days. So, it was like I let go of the it should feel like I didn't watch anybody's courses, right? It was just like, I just am going to create a lesson because 'cause I've created lessons all the time. It's just something about putting it in a box that made it more difficult. So, like, again, I to like, the point I'm trying to make is I just stopped trying to make the course. I just made the damn course.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So then let's get into that because I wrote this down too when you were originally talking was perfectionism. This idea of everything has to be perfect. And then you said that obviously some of the content that you created where the lighting wasn't perfect and everything didn't look perfect. And maybe you flubbed up on your words a little bit. Why is it we know that perfection doesn't exist and we know that
Mhm.
people like imperfect content. So why do so many creators hold off on maybe not even creating content, but sharing the content that they did create?
Yeah, because there's many reasons, right? But I think the one I think about a lot is we're afraid of the feedback loop, and we're afraid that it will, confirm our original fears. So, like, if I don't wanna put it out because I don't think it's perfect, I don't want someone to call me out for that thing. It's like the spotlight effect, right? So, I don't put it out, I'm safer. But if I do put it out and someone says something about it, then it confirms that I suck. So, then the next time I'm not gonna go for it again. The way around it, at least for me, is I look at everything like a prototype. Again, if your listeners are if people listen to you a lot, I'm sure they're used to the book references all the time. Like, so this is the
Yes.
18th book I'm referencing. But
Yes.
designing your life is a really great book around this because it was written by product designers, and then they created a course at Stanford around because they need to solve this question of like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And so they have this concept called prototyping, which I really like. Instead of looking at it like it's a finished product, this is the product, and I worked years at it. Hey, I'm prototyping my way, and I'll never get to the point of failure or even perfection. It's just I'm always prototyping. So going back to the course, for example, the thing that allowed me to just create it in 2 days was I realized that like at any point in the software I use, I can switch out the video. So at any point, I could just refilm it. I could just redo it. It's not final. So I'm prototyping. I came out with a course, and if I want to add something, I'll just add it. Or if people say it sucks, maybe I'll find a new audience. Like I'll just prototype until I feel like okay, it's done and I'm final with it. So it's same I would imagine it's the same thing with writing a book, right? Like you write and then you edit and then you edit and then you edit and you keep editing until you're like, all right, it's not that you stop when it's done because the truth is you could never be done. You stop when you feel like this is about as good as I could do today. And so I'll move on to something else. So for me, to get rid of perfectionism is just you look at life, you look at everything like I'm just prototyping. I'm building to the point where I feel like it's all right.
This reminds me of the quote by Leonardo da Vinci that is, "Art is never finished, only abandoned."
Mhm.
We have to get rid it's even with writing a book, like you said, it's you get it out, you get it out. I've never met one author that wrote a book that doesn't look back and say, "I would have changed this. If I could go back, I would have changed this about the book. I would have wrote it differently." Of course you would have. You're a different person than you were when you wrote it. Okay, so you talked about you found a cadence, you found what really works for you. So what is that? First of all, what is that and what platforms are you creating on? Is it multiple platforms? Are you focusing on one? Because that's another thing
Yeah.
people get real caught up in.
Yeah. So now I prioritize YouTube. I guess three things, right? I prioritize the evergreen content. So the evergreen content just simply means like it lasts for a long time. YouTube is number one because the shelf life on those are like 9 years. And I simply repurpose if I feel like it to short form. The reason why it's like to me, to other people, it may make sense. It just doesn't to me to spend a day or however long make a short form content that dies in like a couple days. That doesn't make sense to me. So for me, it goes in this order. It goes YouTube, my newsletter, and then Threads. Threads is like my Apple Notes. So when I have an idea, most of my ideas come when I put my daughter down. I'm like holding her and she's falling asleep, and then I'll rattle off some threads that are in my head because I'm sitting there quietly, right? So ideas come. And then if I like something that I said on threads, I'll turn around and make a long form content. So that's the platforms. In terms of my cadence, and I'm really happy. It got me really into creating again. which is interesting because I always said I hated writing until I made myself write. And you were saying earlier the importance of writing for ideas, I never realized how vital it was. So I would say something on video, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but whatever, I launch it. When I write it down first, I see the error of my thinking, or I'll see gaps. And so I see it on paper that I go, "Oh, I need to fill this hole. Like there's something missing here." And then I could write it. And then my ideas are more fresh, and then I could do it. So here's the process. Every day in the morning, for me, it's like 6 a.m. because the kids are asleep and my wife's asleep. It's like the only time it's like I can be alone with my thoughts. I read first and then I write. So I'll set a timer for 30 minutes. I stole this from Keith Cunningham. He wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid. He calls it thinking time. And so it's like I turn off everything and I simply just write. Oftentimes, it's just I have one line that I'm thinking about and then I'll just finish the rest of it. So like I had this one stupid line uh the other day, which was not working on your sales process is like going to the gym and skipping leg day. So I start with that concept and then I just write. And then obviously I tweak and whatever. So that I do that every day. So now at the end of the week, Monday through Friday, I should say. So now I have 5 long form or like kind of like stories, if you will. Then on Sundays, I take those 5 and that becomes my podcast. So I literally just am talking through the 5 things I wrote through the week. Then from there, right, I create a blog post if I will, whatever. What I'm doing now is those 5 lessons or whatever, each one will be a newsletter. So everything spawns from literally just me writing in the mornings and then creating a long form video based on those 5 writings that I wrote and then repurposing on different platforms, if you will.
When you write and when you have everything down and you have your points, is it a full-on script that you're recording, or are you just bullet pointing and now you're
No.
having
No, that's kind of the fun part. So, again, I use Apple Notes. So the title, the line, and I'll work on the line sometimes to make it a little bit more clear. But the line is bolded, and so it's like a headline. So as I'm doing my podcast, all I see because in Apple Notes you can actually hit this toggle and it'll get rid of the lines, like everything you wrote. I'll get rid of them. I remember what I said, and I'm decent at like just talking, and so I'll see the line and I'll start. And then the fun part, and this is the creative process that's fun for me, is the game is because sometimes they're vastly different topics. The game for me is can I, as I'm talking, find a way to transition to the next one that feels seamless?
Mm.
So it makes it's like performance, like it feels like a game, like it's kind of fun. So, like, for example, I was talking about the enrollment process, but then the next thing I wrote was on productivity. Well, how do I transition into that? Right. So it becomes a little bit more um, it's a challenge that still makes it more fun. If it was super scripted, I'd probably get bored of it, but because when I hit that record button, I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna say and the way that I'm gonna say it.
It's funny because I used to write scripts, like full-on scripts, and I had a teleprompter, and it was like a whole thing, and I really there's reasons why I love doing that, and they're what you just said, because you are able to solidify the idea, it flows beautifully, it makes sense, and it also I then know, okay, this is gonna be a 3-minute video, or this is gonna be a
Mm.
5-minute video. And I actually really enjoy doing it. I am like, I can decently do the teleprompter, it works, and it's fun, and that's that. But what I realized was as I was as I was reading it off the teleprompter, I'd be like, "Oh, I wanna add something here.
Yeah,
There's more that I wanna say." Is it gonna be said in the most succinct way? No, because if I spent time writing it, then it would be clearer. But I also still think there's something really fun about watching somebody that you can tell is kinda riffing on an idea. And
yeah,
so I think to have bullet points so I went back to having bullet points. I do write out the bullet points kind of like fully, but then when I record, I just know it's not going to be 3 minutes. It's probably going to be 7 minutes or 8 minutes. And so when I would watch that 7 minutes, I would sometimes say, well, I could have said all this in 3 minutes, but you do get to know someone's personality when you're watching them 7 minutes versus 3 minutes when you can tell it's even if they are great at the teleprompter, you can tell it's scripted in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah, and I do to your point, there is times when teleprompter makes sense. Like, an example I would say is like a sales landing page, and you have a video on that sales landing page. Like,
Yes.
you kinda need to have it dialed in. But for, like, content in general, for me, it's like I like the bullet points. Whenever I try to do teleprompter, I don't know what it is, I suck. If I'm scripted, I just did a talk for a company called Keep, and it was supposed to be scripted, and I flat out told them, I was like, it's not. Like, what I do on practice night, we did a rehearsal, just so you know, it's gonna be vastly different because it just I like picking up the room. So if I'm saying something and I see somebody in the audience, which is exactly what I did, I made fun of them because I know them, and I was like, "This'll tie in." And so I like having the freedom. And so the discipline, I think, comes in, like, Jocko Willink always says, "Discipline equals freedom." For me, the discipline is writing. So by me writing, the points and the argument, the logic is there because I wrote it out. And so now it's like I have it to pull it out whenever I need it to, right? Now I will say there are times where I'll get done filming and I go, shit, I wrote this thing. That was a good line. Like that was a good point. But it is what it is. The cool thing is that writing is going to go on my newsletter. So it's somewhere. It'll live
Yes.
somewhere. So,
Yeah.
I never lose it. It's just and then the other hard part is letting go. That's the once it's done and I hit the I have a kind of a stupid rule of I don't edit anymore. So I have to do it in one take. Have to is a strong word. I choose to do it in one take. And part of that reasoning is I just want it to feel organic. Like I just want that's just how I if you see me at a conference or we pull up, like this is how I talk. So why would I and I am complete if you see me scripted reading, it's a total I don't know what it is. I can't bring my personality when it's scripted. I don't know what it is. I suck at it.
Yeah.
So I'm just like,
I feel like it really is like a skill. You have to practice it and it doesn't come naturally. It's hard to have that personality and also be reading. And now my eyes are just getting so bad so I can barely like with the teleprompter I'm like I can't even read that anymore. So,
yeah,
oh my
no,
gosh.
it's and then too, it's like looking at the camera. It's just it's tough.
Oh, yeah, but I had a whole setup where the teleprompter I'm looking at my camera now, it's like the way you put it, it's the teleprompter is
Is
behind
in
the
front of the camera.
yeah, so I'm looking directly at the I thought I was
That's
really
sick.
I was like, "Look at me being all professional
Yeah.
like the pros." Oh my gosh, there was something that I wanted to share this because this was on, today of all days. I recorded a video and I was so excited because I did my bullet points ahead and I was so excited about it. And it was something that I was like, yeah, this is really good. I feel like this is really helpful. So I'm finished. And guess what? I did not actually press record
Nice.
the entire time. I did not press. I was so upset. I was
Yeah.
so upset. I was like, I got done. I was finished. I was like, yay, this is going to be amazing. And I had to redo the whole thing.
Mhm. Hey, that is the worst. I'm not even gonna lie. There's times where I'm like, I guess the universe didn't want that one, and I
That's
just
what I
move right on.
say.
Yeah,
I was like, "You know what? I did it with all my energy and all my heart, so it was a good practice run, and now I get to do it again."
yeah.
Oh my
That's a
gosh,
good
but
reframe. I would have been like, I guess done. The day's done. It's all right. Not doing it again. There's definitely been times, especially when I had a moment of like a scary moment when I was doing the course over the weekend, and the screen went out and it said like, "Oh, it stopped recording," and I was like,
wow.
when did I didn't see it. When did that happen? And then it was on Riverside, what we're using now. Turns out it was recording the whole time, so it ended up being fine. But I was like 13 minutes in, and I was like, if I have to redo this, like
Oh,
I'm not doing it again. Like people are just not gonna get this part of the course. And then luckily,
oh,
luckily it ended up recording. But there was a moment where I was like, well, that sucks.
yeah, it is tough, like, that's why when I see full-time creators, I just it it is no joke. It is a
Yeah.
lot of work. It is I mean, it is a lot. I mean, there are more times than I care to admit recording a video the lavalier mic was on me, but I didn't turn it on, or it wasn't connected the right way, and it didn't get the audio. It just so many things that happen. I can't imagine if you do it for a living every day, and that's like the way you earn a living.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
I
So
got like, so this creators, so there was a period of time on YouTube where everyone was quitting YouTube. And like some of the biggest creators like stopped. And then there's a guy named Matt Diavella, self-improvement guy. He quit his channel for a period of time. And what I found that was super fascinating about that world, and again, I'm a sales consultant who happens to make content. There are content creators who happen to have a business. And then what happened was it changed from they're creators to their business first. And so they were creating for the business and then they got burnt out, right? And totally understood it because it's like you lost the art, if you will, because it and then I felt the first inkling of this. I won't say the brand, but, somebody reached out to me because I made a piece of content because I wanted to make it around The Remarkable. And so I use this thing called The Remarkable, and so I just made a piece of content about how much I freaking love it because I do. They don't pay me, I just wanted to talk about it because I wanted to talk about it. So another company reaches out, and they're like, "Hey, can we send you this product, and then you just make content, make whatever you want." Cool, I'm down. You send me a $4,000 thing, like, I'm in. And then so I create the content, whatever, and then I get the feedback. This is why I give creators all the kudos in the world. Then they started saying, "Hey, could you actually do this a little bit different? Could you do that?" And then at that point, I'm done. I was like, "No." So luckily, I mean, I'm in business, so I don't mind being blunt. And I was like, "No, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm gonna do the piece of content you told me to do, but I'm doing it my way because that's why you reached out to me." And then they luckily, the kudos to them, they backed off and they're like, "All right, cool. Thank you." Right? Ended up being fine. But it was this thing of like that I could see how creators get burnt out from brand deals because people
yeah.
are like, "Hey, can you do this?" And when you first start out, I can imagine like for me, I'm fortunate that I don't make money off like that's not my business strategy. So I didn't care like telling them no because I was like, well, good news is I have a business. But I could see a world where if they were like, "Hey, we're gonna pay you 10 grand to do this," I'd be like, "Oh crap, I have to do it the way that they want me to do it." But then it's not fun anymore. Like,
Yeah. Well, just like what we've been saying, it's very different. You have to know what your goal is. You have to know where you want to go in the content game. And it's different for everyone. Look, there are content creators that have a very, very small channel. And let's just, for example, a real estate, have friends that do it for real estate. They have small channels, but it produces
yeah,
a lot of revenue for them every month. Because if they get one lead out of it and they sell a home or they sell a property or whatever, they're making bank off of it. And so
yeah.
it
I've
doesn't have
completely
it
backed away from it because I had this because I was doing a lot of I call them book debriefs. So I'd read a book and then I'd make a video about it because I was like 10x easier than 2x in one of them, right? Again, because I love that book. And then there was a minute there where I was like, because I have, speaking of creativity, like I love creating offers. Is like I love doing it. And so I was like, you know what? It'd be really cool if I create an offer where if you're an author, you can reach out to me and I will help you with the marketing. But and included in that is I'll make a YouTube video about it, which will drive sales and whatever. And then somebody reached out to me and was like, "Hey, read my book and do this thing for me." I was like, "All right, cool." I read the book and it sucked. And then that's when I was like, "I couldn't do this." Because like if you paid me, let's call it 10 grand to read the book and then make content around it for X amount of time, and I hated it, but I had to do it because you paid me. And that's when I got rid of I was like, I'm not doing that offer. Just because it's like it'll take away the fun of it. You know what I mean?
well, and yes, I do because I've had people I was doing some book recommendations on in fact, one of my most watched videos is a book review I did for the oh my gosh, Dan Dan and Chip Heath's book, The Power of Moments.
Mm,
Is that what it is? Oh my gosh, that's so bad. Anyway, it's I was like, Why is this one so popular?" But, um, and what I recognized is I had a lot of authors that started writing me and saying, "Hey, can I send you my book? Can I send you my book?" And I was like,
yeah.
"Well, I don't wanna read that book." Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't what I wanted to read, so I would rather just read the books I wanna read, and if it was something I was interested in, of course, if they wanted to send it to me, then I would be happy to read it, but to your point, like, but if I didn't like it, I don't wanna talk badly about an
And I
author.
can't tell you when it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like, that was the
Yes.
other thing. So, like, I've made 2 videos about 10x easier than 2x just because, again, I really like the book. And then somebody else sent me their book, and it just sat on my shelf. And I would look at it and I go, it just wasn't calling me. And I know that
Yeah.
sounds super, like, woo-woo, but, like, it just wasn't, and then I made myself read it because I was like, this guy's cool and he wrote a book and he reached out, like, let me read it. And how I know how to make a video with a book is like, I'm like, "Ooh, I could talk about this," or like, "Ooh, this is really interesting. I have a two," like, I actually tested it, and so as I'm reading, the ideas for that's where the index cards come from, right? I'm reading it and I go, "Ooh, this is something I could talk about," and that turns into a video. But when I was reading this particular book, like, nothing was coming to me, and so I was like, "Sorry, buddy, like, I know you sent me this book, but, like, I can't make you a video because I not that the books suck, I don't feel it. Like, it's not gonna come,
Yeah.
so, like, my bad," like, and then I end up, like, buying another copy of the book 'cause I felt bad that he sent me a free one.
Oh
But
my gosh, well, that's nice. I feel like, oh my gosh, I buy so many books just to support authors, just
yeah,
because I wanna support authors. Um, but that I was doing okay, I could talk to you all day because I feel like we have such similar ideas of creating. It's so awesome. But let me ask you before we go, because since we're both such book lovers, and other than 10X is wait, what is it? What is Dan's book
10x is
again?
easier than 2x.
10X is yes, I have it. I have the book on my bookshelf. And what are some other books that you've read recently that you really loved?
The Courage to be Disliked,
Ooh, yes.
freaking love that. I can't don't make me say the author's name because 'cause I'm gonna butcher it, but, like, it falls in line with a couple things. So, The Courage to be Disliked, first of all, is written really interestingly in that, it's written almost like it's a philosophy book. So, it's written like the, teacher is talking to a student. And so the student is like, "What do you mean this?" And then it's him coming back and they're having, like, a debate. It's kinda written like if you like Socrates kind of philosophy book. So it's not like it's this, and it's like it's a discussion. But the reason I love it because again, it falls in line with, like, The Backwards Law. It falls in line with, like, The Surrender Experiment, which is another good book. But it's one of those books that, talks a lot about responsibility without talking about responsibility. And again, this leads into, like, content creation and all those things, but it talks about how, like, everything you want, you will get, but you need to be clear about what you want. And so one of their examples they give is they talk about, imagine a kid who, gets anxiety leaving the house. And so he gets these horrible panic attacks. And then as a result of going outside and having these panic attacks, the parents go, "Well, don't go outside. Like, we're gonna coddle you, do all these things." And so now he's rewarded by not going outside. And despite the fact that he may, so the argument the philosopher gives is no, he doesn't want to go outside. It's not that his anxiety won't let him. He just doesn't want to go outside. So if you change it from, well, I want to go outside, but I get anxiety, you get rid of anxiety by simply just saying, I want the thing, and then leading the actions to get there. Like an example that kind of like is like a real life thing. I knew this person once that I was working with, that I was a consultant for. And he talked a lot about his anxiety online. So he'd be like, "Oh, like I get really bad anxiety around this thing, and it's okay to have anxiety and all this stuff." And he would get lots of love and attention and leads in business from it because everyone was like, "Oh, he's really, really authentic." And so one day we're talking, and he's like, "I just wish I didn't have anxiety. It's like stressing me out." And I asked him this question, which pissed him off originally, and then he listened. And I go, "Could it be possible you actually like having anxiety?" He's like, "No, there's no way." I go, "Well, hear me out. Look what happens when you get it. You get it. Your brain says, I get anxiety, and then I get leads, and then I get business. So what if you just stop making that kind of content talking about it? I'm not telling you to like hide from it or be inauthentic. I'm just saying, could you possibly um, create a future you that doesn't have anxiety by simply not posting it everywhere?" And now, granted, he didn't take me up on the challenge, right? He just continued to do it. But that's kind of like the point of the book. And again, that's why I was like kind of obsessed with it.
Okay, if that was the point, what you just described, have you ever read Existential Kink?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh. So it's called Existential Kink. Unmask your shadow and embrace your power. A method for getting what you want by getting off on what you don't.
Yeah.
So the whole concept of this book, and she is a psychiatrist. So she talks about how all of her clients that she works with, whatever you have in your she basically flat out says, whatever you have in your life, you want it.
Hmm.
Whether it's you're single and you want a relationship, or you have anxiety and you say you don't want it. No, you actually do want it. for the exact reason that you were talking about. Like, you're getting something out of it. And Tony Robbins talks about this too. He talks about this in a way that there is something like, if you're constantly complaining, you get rewarded for that because people are like, "Oh, are you okay?" And you don't wanna get rid of that. So it's so wild, but this book, it gives example after example of all of, like, some of her clients that she's worked with, but it is so wild when you
I
think
just
about
wrote
it.
it down because I was like, this falls in line with.
Oh, you're
I
gonna
got
love
one
it.
more for you that's like super super
Okay.
weird. So my wife and our mom go to this person who is like considered like Reiki. Have you ever done Reiki before?
Oh,
So
yeah.
Reiki and then like Chinese medicine, whatever, whatever. So anyway, so apparently she can, as she's giving you a massage, your body is like talking to her. So anyway, it was super weird because a lot of the stuff she's talking about, I was like, that's real. And it was just super trippy. But one of the things she said kind of falls in line with this. And so again, sorry, mom, but she says, hey, anything that you do in business or whatever works. Like you could literally make uncapped money in anything that you do, but you stop yourself at a certain point. And part of that reason is you created a contract when you were a kid that said, when I'm successful, I'm going to take care of my mom. But you don't want to do that anymore. So you purposely stop yourself from getting too successful because you think you have to then take care of everyone around you. And then I'm like looking back to all the things like how many times I've changed directions and I've done this, and it always at a certain dollar amount in my business. Once it hits that, I literally created an agency in 6 months, multiple six-figure agency. And then once it hit like 300,000, I literally fired all the clients and I started over.
No way.
And I had excuses for it, right? Like I had in my mind, there were solid excuses. I was like, well, I don't like doing it. Fulfillment. But I could have just hired someone and took over the operations of it. I could have, there's so many other ways I could have done. But every time I hit this dollar amount, I start over. And I think it falls in line with this block of like, well, if I get that, then I have to do this thing. And so the whole point of like that in these books was the one, it's the awareness of the contract that you've made, whether it's when you're younger or whatever, acknowledging it, being aware of it, and then choosing, I don't want that anymore. And it's okay to change. But like, yeah. So anyway, it's kind of the same kind of thing we're talking about here. Super weird.
Wow. Isn't it wild to think about all of those, what happened to us when we were kids or what we learned? Like, all of this stuff is so deep rooted. Oh my gosh, that's a whole other show.
Even the stupid thing of like, I'm still working on it, but like me saying I suck at writing, like that's a contract that I made with myself when I was a kid, just because I didn't learn how to read until I was like, I hid the fact that I couldn't read until I was around fifth grade. And then, I used to tell myself I didn't know how like, I suck at reading. Well, now look, I read tons of books, right? And so I had this experiment, and this is how I got into the process of writing every day of like, all right, what if I just I can say all day that I suck at writing, whatever, but I'm just gonna make myself write. Well, then that now it turns out I like writing now.
Yeah.
I enjoy the process, and then even when I said to you earlier, like I've always thought I love writing, I love reading books and it'd be really cool to be an author. This is the first time in my life that I'm like, "Oh, I could write a book."
Yeah.
But it just took
Oh,
me doing it.
yes. Yes. This, oh my gosh, this reminds me of David Hawkins' book, Letting Go, and he says, "The unconscious will allow us to have only what we believe we deserve."
Mhm.
Like, your unconscious has to believe that.
Yeah.
And
It's, like, super
so
weird, like, how important. I had a mentor once who he's the first person that introduced me to this concept, right? Like the unconscious part of it, and I call it a responsibility, right? And I think you and I talked before, you've been through Landmark. It's the same kind of, like, kind of philosophy. Um, but, like, it it's the language of being important. So, like, one of the things I realized, I don't like the word deserve for some reason. So when I say I deserve the success, I have a negative reaction to it. And so I pull away from success. So instead of saying I deserve, is just I'm open to it. I'm open to success.
mm,
And so for some reason, it's just interesting even how words have an effect on our brains and depending on how we grow up, whatever. I hate like there's something about the word deserve. It doesn't work on me. It doesn't work.
I wonder if it's like, it feels almost like entitlement, if
Yeah.
that 'Cause that's
Yeah.
kind of sometimes how I like, when people are like, "I deserve this," it comes from a negative place, like, in how some people use that word.
Yeah, and probably for me, I grew up around those people, right? They're like,
Mm.
"I deserve to have," and I'm like, "You're not doing anything though. What do you mean?" And so
Right.
I just but it's just being open now. I just like I'm
Yeah.
open to the idea
I
of
like it. All right, Raylan, I always ask my last question to everyone is, what is one thing that the listener can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative and fulfilling life?
I think it's again, this is something that I've been experimenting with for a while, but it's just write for 10 minutes. Or if you don't like, if you're like me at a point and you're like, I don't really love writing, is talk for 10 minutes by yourself, and you can treat it like a form of meditation. But if you set a 10-minute timer, and this is the important part, get rid of everything, turn off your laptop, turn off, the notifications on your phone. I use the Alexa over here, and I set a timer for me, it's 20 minutes, but let's say it's 10. And then I just think and just talk out loud. So I started with a voice note. So on my phone, have a voice note, and I just have a concept or a problem, and I start talking about it. What that'll do for, at least what it did for me, was within that 10 minutes, you're going to say something that you can expand upon, and it becomes a lot more interesting. And then you can create on that. So for me anyway, if you want to be a better creator, I think you need 10 minutes alone, but capture and document that alone time. It's one thing to like document. It's like the idea of like being in the shower and you have an idea, but you do nothing with it. There's one stupid joke that I think about all the time. This guy named Mitch Hedberg. Mitch Hedberg had this joke, and he said, one time if I'm in a hotel room and I'm laying there and I'm thinking about a joke and it's really funny. The problem is I have to convince myself though it's not funny, so I don't have to get out of bed and write it down. Like we all do that, right? Like so it's the discipline of writing and documenting the idea, I think is more important even than creating. If you can capture the
Yeah.
idea, everything else kinda takes care of itself.
Yeah, it's like when have you ever had the you wake up and you have this incredible idea and you're like, "I'm gonna remember it. It's so good, I could never forget it." And then you're like, "Wait a second." And like an hour later, you're, "Wait, what was that?"
This happens at least once a month where I'll go to my wife and go, "Babe, I got the best business idea in the world. I know this is what I'm gonna do." And she'll listen. This is why she's so sweet. She'll listen to me ramble on about this idea for 30 minutes, and at the end, she'll go, "Honey, you had that idea last year." I'm like,
Oh my g
"Okay. I forgot about it."
You're like, "Well, I am still as brilliant as I was back then." So, oh my
She has
gosh.
this thing, like, she's, working the business or whatever, and she would, what she would say to me, because I was like, "How do you know?" 'Cause it's just like her mom. She's a really good executive assistant. She's, like, so good. I go, "How do you" I spitball a bunch of stuff at you. "How do you know the most important things to work on?" And she would say, "Well, if you repeat it, I know it's important. But if you say it to me once and you just talk about it once, I'll document it, but I'll just put it on the shelf. But if you repeatedly talk about this idea and I can tell you're excited, like, more than 3 times, that's when I take action on it."
Ooh, interesting. I like that. Raylan, we're gonna have you come back on because I feel like
We could
this
talk for days.
I know, we could talk for days. We should do the whole episode of, like, what have you read over the past month, and, like, we can,
Dude,
like,
yeah.
compare notes because I've already just in January alone, I've already read a bunch of books that I'm so excited about, and there's all I love getting book recommendations, and what I love too is I love that you mentioned The Courage to Be Liked because this is my sign to get it because earlier this morning, I was watching something that referenced that book, and that's not the first time that I've heard it, so I'm like, "Okay, it is I get it. It's the sign. I'm getting the book."
That's one of those books I've heard, because I was reading Feel Good Productivity,
Mm.
which is a good one, and they referenced it, and then there's something else that I heard that and I was like, "I should read it." And so they have courage he has Courage to Be Disliked, and I think the next one is Courage to Be Happy.
Oh.
I think because it's this one right here. So this right here is the ones I have to read, and then when I read them, I put them away. But that's my reading list.
Oh, nice. Oh, I don't do it like that.
My wife has been telling me I need a new bookshelf, but I don't like
Oh, I need a
I
new
gotta do something.
bookshelf. I've been seeing videos of people that have, like, whole book rooms, and I'm like, "That is on my dream list now." I just want a whole room of I just want, like, a little library. That's
Yeah.
all.
It's the organization part. The last thing, and I'll let you go because we got to go do other things. But
Yes.
it took me a while to have a system because what I hated was I would buy a book, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, and then I put it away, and then I won't get to it for like a year.
Yeah.
So now at least I have like that's the reading list. Like I know to go and grab that book and then and finish it. But yeah. There's one other thing, by the way, for the readers. I'm really excited about this new thing I got. So I can recall stuff from books pretty well, but I wanted to be even better. So I started doing this thing where I read a book, and as soon as I get 2 or 3 chapters ahead, I'll start the audiobook. So that way, like, I'm hearing it now. So I read
Yes.
it, and then I'm rehearing it, and the cool thing is I can just put it in the car, and it's almost background noise, but it's helping me recall better. So, it's like a new kinda thing because Spotify, if you have premium, there's a bunch of books you can listen for free. So, it's like I don't have to double buy the book. Kinda nice.
I do the same exact thing. I can't tell you how many books are on my bookshelf that I also have on Audible, and I also have Scribd. So I have Scribd, Audible, and then you can get stuff from the library. It's ridiculous is what it is.
Yeah.
But I do the same thing because sometimes I'm reading or sometimes I'm listening to a book and I get so excited that I want to highlight. So now I have to buy the physical book
Yeah.
or vice versa. So anyway, all right. We're definitely going to have you come back on
Yeah.
and do this all over again. But it was so great to see you. Thank you so much
Yes.
for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Anytime. This was fun. I appreciate you having me.